ああいう愉快な大バカ者は俺が独り占めだ。
Oh boy, do we have our hands full today, so I'm going to cut to the chase. Today we're going to be going over some of my personal picks for anime where the main character gets betrayed, then becomes a badass. I know. You'd expect the list to be chock full of revenge fantasies. Now, originally I'd actually thought of making a list of purely revenge stories, but I changed my mind. I don't think that we should limit the shows to that specific subgenre, so I decided to expand the scope a little bit more to feature characters who underwent betrayal, only to use that as motivation to become stronger. As they always said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? But before we start, I'd like to share some good news. We're just a little over 150,000 subscribers before hitting that sweet 1 million subscription milestone. Let's give a round of applause to everyone, and I'd like to encourage you to share the channel to your friends and subscribe if you haven't done so already. It does help me a lot, and together we can reach that monumental milestone together. Now, let's get on with the list. Why don't we open with probably this year's most controversial series. Redo of Healer starts the list at number 10. Now, being a healer ain't easy, you know. In online games and fantasy worlds, one wrong move and your entire party gets wiped. One mistiming and the entire raid is lost. While healers carry such a heavy responsibility, their skill set also makes them very high in demand and unfortunately prone to being taken advantage of. Kiaru's bright future as the world's greatest healer never materialized. Instead, he ends up on the path of torture and abuse. But fortunately for him, he has in him the greatest ability of all time, a healing spell so strong that it allows him to wind back time. Carrying the anguish of his past, the time for vengeance has come, and it's going to be one hell of a show. Redo of Healer takes some of the popular elements in revenge fiction and takes the more controversial aspects to the extreme, pushing the limits of what can be shown on TV with its violence, shock value, and its sexual content. But needless to say, I'll put in some content warnings here for those interested in watching it. Now, before we continue, I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsors of this video, Punishing Grey Raven. Ever wanted some high-octane cyberpunk action thrills on the go? Plus, my favorite part of any anime-themed game, waifus. Then, look no further than this game that's ready to take the mobile world by storm, Punishing Grey Raven. Punishing Grey Raven is a mobile RPG that gives you a taste of the best of both worlds, combining strategic RPG mechanics and fast-paced hack-and-slash gameplay. Couple that with the sci-fi aesthetic and soundtrack that looks hella cool, and you've got one of the best games the world of mobile gaming has to offer. What I love the most about Punishing Grey Raven is that in addition to the gameplay and the character design, you also get one of the best written storylines out there. The game takes you to a post-apocalyptic world where machines have taken over, forcing humanity in the space colony Babylonia. A fight for reclaiming Earth is in place, and you're the one in charge of the mission, leading your own group of soldiers into the fray. The game's had its global launch, and I would love it if you joined the party. Let's take to the fields and take back Earth together. And all you have to do is to check out the download link in the description box to get started on your journey. I hope to see you in battle, comrade. If I recall, there was a saying that goes something like, "He who fights monsters should be careful, lest he turns into one himself." While it's not a perfect analogy, I think that pretty much sums up Ari Fureta's premise, specifically for our protagonist Hajime's character arc. Sent into an isekai world with the rest of his class and getting the overlooked transmutation ability, resident geek Hajime finds himself betrayed by his classmates. Sent down into the abyss and left alone to die, he barely clings on to life. He struggles to survive and becomes stronger by fighting ferocious monsters, only to meet the vampire Yui. Together with her, Hajime looks to find his way back home, starting the tale of an ordinary boy's journey to become the world's strongest. Like Redo of Healer earlier, Ari Fureta made some noise back in his days. This time, it's mostly for the memes regarding the CGI. However, once you look past the admittedly hilarious graphics, Ari Fureta ends up a pretty entertaining piece of popcorn entertainment. If you're up for gloriously overpowered protagonists with a supporting cast that makes the squad look like some kind of edgy Konosuba, then this might be the show for you. Next up is hit light novel adaptation Stigma of the Wind. If you were around during the late 2000s and saw Stigma of the Wind, I wouldn't blame you if the show reminded you of Shakugan no Shana. However, past the red-haired female lead with flames and the romance, the two shows are actually quite different, and it all starts with the premise of the main character. Stigma of the Wind introduces us to Kazuma, who's been sent into exile after losing a fight to his second cousin. Now that's a top-tier stereotypical Asian family right there. Jokes aside, Kazuma's actually talented at something. Nope, It's not flame magic, which he's absolutely terrible at, but it's actually wind magic. It proves to be a curse as a series of murders involving wind magic has Kazuma in the crosshairs of the Ganagi family and said second cousin Ayano. It's a fight for survival to clear his name and unravel the mystery of the murders. Just like Ari Fureta before, Stigma of the Wind features an overpowered light novel lead. However, Kazuma's more of the hiding your true powers type, and I'd have to say that his interactions with Ayano are pretty entertaining. The visuals alone can put the show above Ari Fureta, but I think that the story also ends up being quite interesting. We move on to classic literature, and what better title to represent the idea of a hero getting betrayed only to become stronger than Gankotsuo.
目を離してはなりませんぞ、アルベール様。決して。
The Count of Monte Cristo is probably the quintessential story about a person being betrayed and coming back stronger, so it's a no-brainer that an anime based on such book is on this list. Gankotsuo generally follows the story of the source material with some deviations. However, what I find the most striking about this show is its unique presentation. The art's already an eye-catcher, and while it may take a while to get used to, it gives the show its own unique look and appeal. While the adaptation style is loose, I'd say that the actual execution of the plot is still intriguing enough to keep me invested in the revenge story at hand. With the Count of Monte Cristo becoming a legendary title amongst the revenge stories the world's seen, it's a given that Gankotsuo will have high expectations. I'd say that the story passes those expectations with flying colours, and I would vouch for this series. This is one of the shows that went under the radar, but the series is completely worth your time. One thing that will always be on a list like this is Shield Hero. The way I see it, Shield Hero is the series that popularized the subgenre to the mainstream, and I'd say that the anime community couldn't have picked a better show for it. Shield Hero stars Naofumi, one of the 4 heroes summoned to defend the kingdom against waves of monsters. His promising journey starts off quite rocky, being framed for crimes and being shunned by his fellow heroes and citizens. Left alone with only his companion, the demi-human slave Raftalia, the two set forth on a journey of redemption in order to protect the kingdom of Melromark. I earlier claimed that Shield Hero is one of the best revenge series, but I meant that in terms of putting the subgenre on the map. It's not the best story by a long shot, but it's got a lot of little things that ensured its success. A sympathetic lead, a nice fantasy world, an easy to follow plot, and lots of cool and cute character designs. I know it's a bit polarizing, but I also really enjoy the dynamic between Naofumi and Raftalia. Next up is Yonah of the Dawn. We've seen this story before now, haven't we? Sheltered princess living a life of luxury before an internal betrayal turns that world upside down, sending her life spiraling into a living hell. While that happens, said princess starts to see the kingdom for what it really is as her horizons get broadened during the seemingly impossible quest to regain the throne. It's not the most unique of stories, but if there's one thing that managed to make that premise work so excellently, it's Yonah of the Dawn. It's a great coming-of-age adventure that showcases some amazing art and a very captivating storyline. It also helps that the characters, down to the side characters, are well developed. Yonah herself is a great protagonist that people root for, and I think that she plays the role of the naive heroine who gets an eye-opener very well. Due to its genre and the nature of the plot and characters, I'm not really surprised that the series isn't so mainstream. However, I do urge you to give this a shot. You won't regret it. The last stop before the top 3 takes us to the chaos of the Prohibition era, 91 Days. It's pretty refreshing to have such a Western aesthetic in anime for once, and I feel that it's rare for anime to cover some historical periods in America like the Prohibition era. The lawlessness and the anarchy of the era is made all the more evident with the start of the story, which sees Angelo's family being murdered by the Mafia. Now, as we all know, tragedy only fuels the fire in the heart of the survivor, and young Angelo leaves the town and rechristens himself Arvilio. 7 years later, he finds himself back in town. With vengeance in sight, he quickly encounters a member of the Mafia family responsible for his family's death, and thus begins the first step to his 7-year plan of finally exacting revenge. Overall, 91 Days is a gripping thriller about a man's path to vengeance. It's a blood-stained path that will keep you in suspense, and you'll find yourself wanting more and more as the plot unfolds. I really recommend this show, and amongst the others on this list, I think that this is one of the most underrated shows out there. Berserk is one of those series that's transcended generations. It could be due to its sheer boldness in depicting violence and the more unglamorous side of anime, combined with beautiful character writing. Whatever the case, Berserk's been immortalized in the anime community for good reason. These days, some people clown Berserk for the 2016 adaptation, but when you put that one aside, you can see a story that is legitimately good. Berserk has carved its way to immortality due to being such a gripping story about survival, betrayal, and the reality of battle. It has a lot of cathartic moments and showcases a whole slew of tragedy and redemption for our characters. If you're looking to get into Berserk, I'd suggest watching the 1997 series. For me, it's one of the best adaptations of the source material, and it has 25 episodes worth of content for you to enjoy the story. It's toned down compared to the manga, but it still gets its point across fairly well. I'd also recommend you watch the third Berserk movie, which I think adapted the Eclipse really well. We proceed to second place with fan favorite Finland Saga. It's unlikely that you're going to need an introduction to this epic journey that chronicles the story of Vikings. Finland Saga, it seems, has been on everyone's watch list since it debuted a few years back. I would say it does deserve it though. Finland Saga takes us back in time as it chronicles the journey of Thorfinn, a promising youth. He finds his world embroiled in chaos with the death of his father. The culprit, the notorious Askeladd. They say that you should keep your enemies closer, so Thorfinn finds his way into the squad of the mighty Viking leader, hoping to one day exact revenge on the man who killed his father. In the midst of war and destruction, will he ever get that chance for sweet revenge? Finland Saga completely deserves the praise being showered by it. It's suspenseful, thrilling, and will always keep you on the edge with its action scenes. It also helps that the show is amazing in terms of characterization and development. Definitely a recommendation. Considered by many to be one of the best anime, not just in modern times, but just all time generally, I think that not a lot would argue Attack on Titan's placement on this list. The show that sent shockwaves through the anime world that can still be felt today has all the makings of an animated masterpiece. It just amazes me how it manages to weave so many character stories, shocking twists, and foreshadowing together to create a series that will be remembered for years to come. It started out as a show about fighting monsters that captivated audiences due to its subversion of the usual anime tropes, but then it became very political and philosophical. It takes quite the genius to come up with a mix of those genres and make it work, but the madman Isayama did it. You also get to admire the character work and the underlying themes of the series, something which I tackle a lot on my other channel catered to my video essays. The link for that's in the upper corner. Love it or hate it, Attack on Titan is an amazing series that will endure the test of time, and I can go to any length as to why it's such an amazing series. Action, drama, a constantly evolving and immersive plot, it's just got everything, and that's why it's my #1 series featuring a main character coming back stronger after betrayal. So, which is your favourite amongst all of these shows? Make sure to tell me in the comments section. Perhaps you can also introduce me to some of the shows in the same vein while you're at it. That's it for this list. Check out channel memberships or my Patreon if you're up for supporting the channel monetarily. Those contributions will go a long way in helping me make these videos even better. Don't forget to check out our sponsors game, Punishing Grey Raven. The link's in the description. Thanks for the time, and I hope you enjoyed the list. Till next time.